Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Since we finished season 2 last week, today we're taking a short break from our episode by episode discussion. Instead, we'll be discussing season 2 holistically. So, like we normally do, we'll do a summary, but here it's of the season, not an episode. Season 2 of The Nanny began with Fran convincing Maxwell to get out of the house, resulting in him bringing home nearly a carbon copy of Fran, but things just didn't work out. The season ended with the Sheffield home being robbed while Fran and Maxwell were at the Shakespeare Festival in New Jersey. In between, it's obvious to a casual observer that Fran and Maxwell are getting closer and more comfortable with each other. Maxwell serves as Fran's white knight repeatedly. He helps her when she's cast as Juliet in a production of Romeo and Juliet. He helps her repair her relationship with her mother after she refuses to accept an inherited mink coat. He saves her from a predatory trash man, and he helps her show up Judy Silverman at her camp reunion. Likewise, Fran assumes her role as the nanny behind the man, helping Maxwell avoid investing with a hot dog vendor who worked on Wall Street, arranging for her sister to cater a backer's audition, and agreeing to care for the children if Maxwell were to die. Of course, not all their assistance is actually helpful. Fran's interference in Maxwell's wooing of a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright results in a new play for Andrew Lloyd Webber, and Maxwell's dragging Fran across the picket line got his production of Norma in the paper for all the wrong reasons. As to the kids, Gracie has learned to stop worrying about the end of the world and to go for it, as per Grandma Yetta's instructions. Brighton was reminded that he wouldn't always be small, and he briefly joined Yetta's canasta team. And Maggie enters a kissing contest and briefly learned responsibility as a candy striper. The Sheffield family also grew, albeit briefly, by the addition of Joshua Elliott, the baby Fran picked up on the subway. Finally, we've learned Niall's secret singing talent and enjoyed Fran and Cece's forced bonding time when they were trapped in the Sheffield wine cellar. We have much more fun and antics to look forward to in seasons 3 and beyond. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
No, that just really reminded me about all the things that happened this season.
Thank you. I can't pretend that this was everything, but I tried to pick some highlights, some lowlights, and just some amusing things to remind everyone of what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, looking back, there's 26 episodes this season,
right?
So I mean, it's 4 episodes longer than the first season, I believe.
I believe that's right.
22. So yeah,
yes,
a lot happened.
Yeah. And I mean, we got to see sides of the characters we haven't seen before. We've gotten to see, everyone kind of growing up, like the kids growing up a little bit, and the adults, I guess, also sort of growing up in some regards. In other regards, they're regressing. But
yeah, we got to see new layouts for the Sheffield home.
Exactly, the house has changed as is needed. We've seen more about, Fran's family. We've learned, a bit more about, Niall's background. We've learned more about Cece and her struggles, shall we say, with her lot in life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of a polite way to put it. I'm thinking of the episode with the trash man, where Fran's pretending to be Cece and she pulls out the receipt from the visiting the shrink, and oh wow, am I unhappy, is what Fran says. Mm-hmm. So I mean, we've gotten to see so much more about the family, and we've seen how Fran and her family has become family to the Sheffields, especially with Grandma Yetta basically being their surrogate grandmother.
Yeah. I was just thinking how I think one of my favorite just jokes this season was Shmooey.
Yes. And that will continue. He will almost forever be known as Shmooey to Grandma Yetta. What is it? Maggie, Gracie's the little one, Shmooey is the boy, and Maggie, the tall one. Oh, hot pants, Yeah, no, we're getting to see so much more about the characters, and they're getting involved in different situations and circumstances, and it's mm-hmm. great.
And just how you were saying that, we've seen, again, to a casual observer, we see obviously the spark between Fran and Maxwell.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, several times this season in episodes, we have them acting as if they're married, not just, employer nanny, again, I'm thinking of the will, one thing, and
Mm-hmm.
then, like the whole conversation is like, you treat me like I'm just the nanny, and it's like you are the nanny.
Right.
Oftentimes we see those kind of blurred lines in their
Yes.
relationship.
So I just based on what you said, I'm like taking notes for our future fun segment. I'm going to try my best to stick with our usual, diversion of future fun until the end. So in
Mm-hmm.
case people do not want spoilers, they can just skip it. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Yeah. No, we see also not just in their verbal communication, but we also see them kissing a
Yes.
number of times.
Yes, we had a kiss count this season.
Yeah, we're up to 4, guys. We're up to 4.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not talking about like just pecks on the cheek. Like, for example, in the episode The Kissing Contest, The Kiss is Just a Kiss, that's the actual title of the name, but where Fran has won the kissing contest, Maxwell can't believe she won because of her kissing prowess, and she shows him. She, basically straddles him, kisses him, and he's floored.
Mm-hmm.
It takes him a moment to recover, and she knows exactly what he had for lunch.
So that I know this is not necessarily on our outline, but that makes me think, of the 4 kisses, which is your favorite or which is the most memorable to you?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, this one, the one from A Kiss is Just a Kiss, is most memorable to me, particularly because of just how I take that back. I take that back. This is the second most memorable. But I will finish my thought and then I will explain which one is to me the most memorable. The second most memorable, because of the way they contrast it with at the very end of that episode where Maxwell goes into Fran's bedroom and tries to explain to her that he's never been kissed like that before. And, she says, I could just kiss you. And he's like, oh, I could never, turn down a favor from a lady. And she kisses him on the forehead and he's clearly disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, the actually most memorable kiss in this season is the one in A Star is Unborn.
Mm-hmm.
That's where Fran is cast as Juliet and Maxwell offers to help put some physical realism into running lines. And of course, Cece hates that idea. And Maxwell puts Fran on the balcony and they recite the lines from Shakespeare. And then, he kisses her and she's clearly stunned. Mm-hmm. Like, it's like not just like
kind of stumbles down the staircase a
little. Exactly. She stumbles down the staircase. She can't, like, it wasn't just like they were reading lines and kissing because the script said to. There was something there. And to me, that's exactly. That's to me the most memorable. Do you have a most memorable?
That one's my most memorable.
It's such a good one.
Yeah. Well, because again, like you said, I feel like, the second one was intense. The first one you talked about, but the second memorable for you is intense, but it comes out of like, there's no lead up to it necessarily, with the Romeo and Juliet, they're like locked eyes, entranced in the moment kind of thing. So.
And he's like hanging off the staircase.
Mm-hmm.
The physical realism is great. And of course, Cece, the scene is that part, the part of Fran stumbling down the stairs is the most memorable, but like the scene is totally made by Cece being like, I would go in a totally different direction from this.
Yeah. We're like channeling Niles in that, that regard.
Right. So, I mean, just kind of along these same lines, it makes me think also of the episode where they don't kiss, but it's a fine friendship. That's one where Fran is friends with Grace's friend Willie's nanny. And then he's like in the bedroom with her and everyone was thinking he was gay, but he isn't. Mm-hmm. And so like then he starts like connecting the dots on like her shirt. If you recall, it's like a red shirt. She's trying to decide she's going to take it back and has holes on. as she puts it, all of my most sensitive areas. Well, almost. And then, you know, Maxwell sees her kissing him and like gets very upset. He leaves. And then, you know, Fran's like in her bra and like all of a sudden, like she realizes she's in just her bra and leggings. And oh my gosh, Mr. Sheffield, she has to like cover up. And then she gets the shirt stuck on her over her hair. And he's like trying to help her. And he's like, oh, I can't do this standing up. Get on the bed. And Niles sees them. Like there's so much, many good things in this season.
Yeah. I mean, Niles definitely stands in for the audience oftentimes when it comes to Fran and Maxwell's relationship.
Yes.
He's the one who expresses frustration when they're just being dense, but he also like roots them on.
Mm-hmm. He's dropping hints to them left, right, and center.
Mm-hmm.
Like still in that same episode, you know, Fran, I think first Maxwell's commenting to Niles about how he finds it so bloody frustrating. And he can't figure out why. Like Kurt and Fran are obviously clearly suited for each other. Like they're perfectly suited. But why do I have this, you know, this irritation or whatever? And Niles says, oh no, you took the last apple. I didn't realize I wanted it until I saw someone else sink his teeth in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, Maxwell's like, eat a bloody pear, and leaves, totally missing the point. Fran comes downstairs and has a similar conversation with Niles about like, well, why am I bored? You know, like this guy knows everything about me and he's still interested. Like this should be fantastic. And she like takes a bite of a pear, and Niles does the same thing. Oh dear, that was the last pear. And Fran's like, oh, did you want it? He's like, yes, but I didn't realize until someone else had sunk his teeth into it. And Fran's just like, you snooze, you lose. Like the two of them are totally out. Like they don't realize what's happening, but Niles does. Mm-hmm. And sorry, we're kind of just like jumping from episode to episode, but that it also makes me think of the episode Strange Bedfellows, where, you know, Fran's worried about the future and Maxwell's solution is, you know, he has a proposal for her, but it's not a marriage proposal. He's going to buy her a condo. Mm-hmm. And Niles, you know, was trying to help set the mood. He brings in the champagne and dims the lights, and all to no avail. So,
yep.
I guess maybe instead of jumping from item to item, are there any like high points you wanna talk about, or that come to mind besides what we just talked about?
Well, you know, like you said, I mean, those are big high points just because, again, I love the romance aspect of this show.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a hopeless romantic.
I love your optimism.
I'm trying to think if there's anything kind of not necessarily Fran Maxwell that kind of sticks out. While I'm thinking, is there anything like aside from what we just discussed that kind of sticks out to you?
So, kind of along similar lines, you know, there's that episode with the strike where Maxwell drags Fran across the picket line and they end up on Sally Jesse Raphael's show. And like his answer for why he did it is that she was important to him.
Yeah.
And like, that's just so sweet. I mean, of course, she totally turns it around. Like, well, why can't men communicate, right, ladies? You know, if we were in the world, there'd be no more wars. And Maxwell's like, oh, because of course, if women ran the world, there'd be no time for wars. There'd be too much talk, right, gentlemen? And it's just Niles and Brighton, like, kind of along the lines of what you were saying about how they're playing it being a family. In the nanny napper, when Fran brings home the baby that she thought she was just holding on the subway and then thought was abandoned on the subway, she and Maxwell clearly are playing house with this baby.
Yeah.
And there's something very endearing about that. Outside of Fran and Maxwell, I will mention the episode Everybody Needs a Bubby, where Grandma Yetta comes and stays and she provides the advice that Gracie really, really needs, because, you know, Gracie has concerns as you might recall in season 1, she had concerns about the melting of the polar ice caps and global warming. And here she has concerns about the end of the world because Brighton, being a big brother, commented to her about, well, didn't you hear? A big asteroid's going to hit Earth right around your birthday. Why do you think we're living like this?
Mm-hmm.
And she panics, and Grandma Yetta sets her straight and is like, don't worry about the end of the world, live every day like it could be your last and go for it. So I find the relationship between Gracie and Yetta to be just totally endearing and wonderful. Because like she's the closest thing to a grandma that we see these kids have at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I mean, and like, just to go off what you said, I mean, we see her come back in like The Curse of the Grandmas,
mm-hmm.
playing that role of grandma. And for the listeners, just as a reminder, that's when Gracie's Girl Scout troop is going to like the retirement home. But unfortunately for Gracie, each of her quote unquote grandmas passes away. So Yetta kind of gets roped into that as well.
She's voluntold. She's
Yes,
gonna be Gracie's grandma.
Yep.
And of course, the key line from her is, "See, you're not a jinx. If you were, I'd be dead, and I wish I was," she says to Fran.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think their relationship is just delightful. I sort of feel like we've been remiss. We've gotten this far into our conversation, and neither one of us has commented on the episode Close Shave,
Mm-hmm.
which had the longest laugh of the entire series.
Yeah.
That's the one for listeners. You may recall that's the episode where, Maggie wants money and her dad thinks she should get a job, but she's going to go get a job where her boyfriend works. So instead she gets a volunteer gig through Fran, through a anesthesiologist Fran once dated, but she didn't feel anything. So she becomes a candy striper, and she's so responsible, 5 days in a row, never late. And then she's supposed to go to a concert with her boyfriend, and she gets Fran to cover for her. And that just happens to be the night that Maxwell has appendicitis.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like in any discussion of high points, that needs to come up at some point, because again, it was the longest laugh in the series, where Fran, in a very I Love Lucy fashion, is like squirting the shaving cream up Maxwell's patient gown, and then like, trying to not look and also not touch him anywhere inappropriate. And of course gets walked in on by Niles with her hands, shall we say, between his legs, near his groin. Is that a good way to describe that?
Yep.
And yeah, so there's that.
And I think you briefly mentioned it in like your summary, but the wine cellar where we see Fran and Cece locked up.
Yes.
That was they kind of bond again. Fran gives Cece a makeover that horrifies Cece, but
yes.
But yeah, but it was again an interesting, because I feel like there's a couple of times this season. Obviously, they still have, for the most part, the same dynamic we saw in season 1, where Cece's kind of rooting for Fran to fail because she sees her as a love rifle.
Correct.
And Fran also, joins in with Niles and kind of making those kind of snide comments about Cece. But then we also have moments where they kind of actually bond.
Mm-hmm. Although, let's be fair, at least in the wine cellar example, that bonding was very, very short-lived.
Oh, yes. Very short-lived. But I'm trying to remember, was it which episode was it that like Niles, Fran, and Cece are all in the kitchen bonding over? Is that with Nadine, or no? Was that season 1?
I think that was season 1, where they were complaining about
the ex-girlfriend.
Chloe. Yes, yeah. Chloe. Okay. That was in the episode Maggie the Model.
Yes.
Yeah.
They have their moments.
So also kind of I don't want to call this bonding, because it wasn't real, but like in the episode Pishki Business, that's the one where Fran's mother's canasta team invests in Maxwell's next play, and he needs more funding, so they go after the trash man, right?
Uh-huh.
And Cece and the trash man have this interaction we don't see on screen, where she kneed him, clobbered him with her green umbrella, and kneed him in the groin, stole his cab. So the trash man's name is Charlie, I now recall. And so Fran pretends to be Cece, and there's this whole interaction where she's constantly pretending to be Miss Babcock, and then like she's supposed to get the $500,000 check from him at her apartment, and well, guess what? The apartment looks like Cece, and Cece has this whole dossier about herself. Her childhood, where she grew up, her coming out party, and like Fran absorbed none of it. So yeah. I feel like we should also talk a little bit about Niles.
Yes. We learned his new, I didn't know he sang.
Exactly. That's what we learned about him. We learned he has a phenomenal voice.
Although not enough to keep investors interested, unfortunately.
Apparently not. Were there any low points for you in the season?
Oh yeah. Again, obviously you and I both agree Chatterbox as a whole was just not up to it. But again, earlier in the season, if you recall, I had strong feelings about the playwright.
Yep.
For our listeners, that's the episode where the cab driver, it turns out, used to go to high school with Fran, and he basically guilt trips her into going out on a date with him, and then threatens to commit suicide during that date if she doesn't get Maxwell to read his play.
Right.
Did not like that.
Fair.
Did not like that at all. So that I would consider a low point. And then, I'm just, spoiler alert, I'm kind of looking at our rankings. And I think we also both agreed when you pish upon a star.
Yeah, that
ranked that low.
Yeah, that was the episode with Jack Walker, the famous actor who apparently was actually just playing Maxwell to get a better contract for his television show.
Yeah.
And like, apparently he was a great actor because on television he was so endearing. But
then he comes back as Mimo. So
exactly.
The poor child actor was in 2 of the episodes we did not like this season.
I'd say maybe it was him, but I don't think so.
No.
Mimo was definitely more likable than Jack. Yeah, I agree. That was also a low point. I know I ranked it fairly high, but Fran gets mugged, like the whole mugging aspect of it, which, as I said last week, like doesn't get picked up. This episode doesn't, like, the series doesn't pick up where Fran and Maxwell left off. That's to me kind of a low point. I'm also not crazy about Kindervelt days. Just I don't care for that. That's the episode where Fran's supposed to go to her camp reunion, and she asks Maxwell, and he says no, and so she ends up going with Eric Estrada. With her from her old Win a Date with Eric Estrada entry form. He like goes there with her on his motorcycle, takes some pictures, and then leaves, leaving her by herself. I mean, thankfully Maxwell saves the day. But I'm not crazy about that episode. I'm also not crazy about Stock Tip. That's the one where Fran starts dating a guy she meets at a Park Avenue grocery store, and he says he works on Wall Street, so she assumes that he's a stockbroker, introduces him to Maxwell. Maxwell's going to invest with him, and then Fran learns that he's a hot dog vendor, so Fran dresses up like a man to get into the men's club to stop the transaction. Wasn't crazy about that.
Yeah, and again, talking just specifically moments versus whole episodes because, again, I rated A Kiss is Just a Kiss out of 4. And the reason it got docked a point was the plot regarding Maggie.
Mm-hmm.
Because, again, I'm just like not thrilled that they have like a 15-year-old kissing a 30-something-year-old celebrity who, by this point, again, is married and has kids.
Right.
And like, that's not like, and everybody just plays it off that it's totally normal to have this contest directed towards teenagers.
Right.
Like, icky.
Right. For moments, in Take Back Your Mink, I docked that episode an entire point because of the comment about mink's not an animal, it's a rodent.
Mm-hmm.
Still don't care for that. Um, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What about so we've also met, I think, some new characters that we haven't met before. For example, Fran's sister Nadine.
Mm-hmm.
What are your impressions of her?
Again, I didn't personally find her super likable.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it doesn't help that part of the plot point in that episode was that she was like kind of trying to seduce Maxwell, kind of, so thereby making her kind of a rival to
Mm-hmm.
Fran. So, and it's just interesting to me that, again, this is the first time we see her, and I believe you mentioned in that episode we don't necessarily see her again.
Correct.
So again, I feel like as a character, we didn't really get much. We just have her kind of set up as this kind of rival
Mm-hmm.
in that one episode. What about you?
Yeah, I'm not crazy about her for all those reasons. Um, but as I'm thinking through all of the like new characters, we only see them once.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, we don't see Jeffrey Needleman again. We don't see um the woman Fran Light, Leslie. Her name is escaping me for the moment. The woman that Maxwell picks up at the club. Um, Theo, the very, very, very wealthy man Fran dates briefly during the episode Material Fran. Um, all these folks we see briefly and then never again. We did see Uncle Jack and cousin Marcia again.
Oh yeah, we did.
So we saw them in season 1, in the episode what is it, the husband, the butler. Totally gonna get the organization of the characters incorrect. The butler, yeah, the butler, the husband, the wife, and her mother.
Mm-hmm.
So we see them again in Take Back Your Mink. But yeah, I feel like almost all the characters we meet we don't see again. So um, anyway, what about how the kids are developing?
So, um, you know, I think there's not there's still some core characteristics that were established in season 1 that they've continued into season 2, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I've mentioned before, Maggie can be very dramatic.
Yes.
She's likely to storm out of her room or blame Fran, like she can be very immature.
Yes.
And I think, though, my impression of this season is she's going through boys a lot faster than
She is.
season 1.
Yeah.
So she's very boy crazy. Hard to keep up with who she's dating. But yeah, I still see a lot of the same characteristics that were established in season 1. As you mentioned, when she was the candy striper, she briefly had some responsibility, for 5 days she made it, but still ends up kind of guilting Fran, like getting Fran to take, her spot for her. So Maggie's a year older than last season, but she's still, I think, a bit immature. I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
agree with that or not.
No, I agree. I agree with every point. And I just think about it specifically in the episode Close Shave when she's trying to get her dad to give her money and then trying to get Fran to take her she does the same thing. She's like, oh, don't be, oh, daddy, or oh, Fran, don't be mean. I love you so much.
Mm-hmm.
It's clearly manipulative, and thankfully it doesn't work on Fran, but then, she gives her big puppy dog eyes, and that does.
Yeah.
Um,
As for Brighton, again, this is established in season 1, and it's the part that I'm kind of uncomfortable with his character. Because
mhm,
last season, what, he was supposed to be like
10.
10.
Yeah.
Okay. They've like very much like sexualized him in the sense that like from
He's
season 1.
interested. He's interested in sex.
Exactly. That's what, yeah. And like to a degree that seems ahead of his age. Like again, I think it would have been if he was more of like a teenager, like 13, maybe some of it, but still there's like sometimes they overstep the line, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But that definitely has continued on into this season for
Correct.
sure.
I agree.
Yeah. He still likes to torment his sisters, but I mean, in general, and we saw this in season 1 too. Like, he is close to Fran, you know.
Right. He lets Fran in.
Yes, yes. I feel like though we go several episodes sometimes without getting much of the children this season.
Correct.
Like so it's a bit more scattered, and sometimes it might be just one child that we really see in an episode, not so much the three of them. If it's the three of them, often it's at like the dining room seat.
Right.
They're eating a meal.
Right.
Sometimes they're in the living room. But again, I feel like there are several episodes that we don't really get much of the kids in.
That's true. That's a very good point.
And then Gracie, still my favorite.
She's my favorite too. She has this. She's wise beyond her years. She's just delightful.
Mm-hmm. And she's just very quirky.
Yes, but also at times she does sort of act her age. Like I'm thinking of the episode where she's supposed to go to the slumber party and she can't bring her teddy bear with her, because she's afraid all the other kids will make fun of her. And obviously that is not what happens. But yeah, no, I agree with your analysis on the kids on every point.
Well, great. Thank you.
Thank you for putting that together, for all of our wonderful listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. Sound like you want to
ask, in terms of any other characters, has your perspective, and again, this is with a grain of salt, because I mean, you've known these characters for years and have watched every episode.
Yeah.
But as it pertains to from season 1 to season 2, is there anything regarding the other characters that you think has remained consistent or has changed?
I think, as we get further into the series, we get to know them better, right? Like that's what happens. The more exposure we have to the different characters, the more we learn about them, the more we're able to pick up on their individual idiosyncrasies.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I think a lot about the episode Everybody Needs a Bubby, with the interaction between Sylvia and Yetta, and how they are so similar, and yet the comment is the big cats can't share a cage. Like the reason Yetta has to come stay with the Sheffields is because she can't stay with Morty and Sylvia, because it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
And I also think about how brazen, I guess is the word I'm looking for, Sylvia is. Still in that episode, they come in from, the three of them had been at theater, and Sylvia realizes she's wearing someone else's shoes. No wonder her feet hurt. She hasn't seen her feet in 20 years. And as they're having this conversation, Yetta's like, whose purse is this? But so then they see the kids, and the kids are playing, I think, checkers or chess or something, and they go to say hi to the kids, and Sylvia says, these are not Fran's children. Fran doesn't have any children. She's not married. She's all alone. Like that line just comes to mind. Because it also is so representative of how she sees her daughter at this point in her daughter's life.
Yeah. Well, and kind of just quickly going off of that made me think of the comment with Yetta telling Maxwell to get rid of the blonde.
Yes. I mean, so like we're seeing so much more of Grandma Yetta in this season. And we will see more of her. So no one worry. Her senility, I mean, senility is not funny, but they sort of make it funny in the series. I mean, I'm trying to not be like, senility is not funny.
Yeah.
But the way they use it as a trope for her is amusing, because like she knows the Sheffields are people who are important to her, and like she knows they are basically family, but she can't recall how they are family. She thinks that they're Fran's kids and that's Fran's husband. But yeah, she tells Maxwell, let's make a deal. I'll dump Dak if you get rid of the blonde.
Yeah. And I think part of the way they try to make it funny is, again, there's no logical reason, because her reasoning for the blonde is that the children are blonde.
Exactly.
But at the same time, she thinks it's Fran's kids. So like it doesn't logically make sense.
Right. And it's also kind of funny how, I don't want to say Fran also uses that, but like in the episode, everybody needs a bubby. Maxwell's complaining about your grandmother. And Fran's like, a woman walking out of Europe with a dining room table strapped to her back, she could be anybody's grandmother. And like walks away, totally confusing Maxwell. So yeah. I like that we're getting more depth of character for these folks. Yeah. That's what comes to mind. It's also interesting to me on rewatching the series, like from the beginning, like intentionally watching it, like for us to discuss, that like I'm picking up on like how quickly certain tropes started, or certain plot lines. Like I think we've talked a lot about Fran and Maxwell's relationship, but like the writers start playing with that very early on. Like we're only in season 2. There's 6 seasons of the Nanny. And we're already seeing like it's not just a purely professional relationship between them.
We've had 4 kisses.
Exactly. We've had 4 kisses. We've had them sleeping in the same bed. We've had the mauling, if you will, of Fran to get the shirt off her hair. We're seeing a lot of them. We're seeing Maxwell realizing she's important. We're seeing there's like this pseudo relationship between them, and it started very early. So I think that answers your question.
Yeah.
Are there other characters you want to talk about?
Not particularly, because as you mentioned, I feel like most of the other characters, like we have our central cast. We always have Niles and Cece, Maxwell and Fran. The kids come and go to some extent in this season. But we see a lot more of Sylvia and Yetta. Outside of that group, though, everybody else is very transitory. Like you said, we basically just see him once and then never again.
The only other character who we did meet in season 1, but who we've seen more of, is Val Torriello.
Yes, that's true. That is true.
And if I recall,
unfortunately, sometimes I forget about her.
Fair. Okay, so my next question might not be a particularly fair one. If I recall correctly, at the end of season 1, I asked you, what did you think of Val? And your comment was, I haven't seen enough of her to really have an opinion. Do you have more of an opinion of her now?
Well, again, to some extent, we've seen a bit more of her this season, but still like not a ton. I believe I've mentioned in a previous episode that she is interesting because she can be pretty astute. Like she figured out Cher was the one, you
Right.
know. And then she's also the one who kind of similar to Niles can see kind of what's going on. Like in terms of I believe the scene was talking about like a rich whatever kind of guy if I'm remembering
Yeah, so
correctly.
you're
Like
thinking
and
of
Maxwell comes in and like I mean like Val puts two and two together where Fran does not.
right. In that instance, you were thinking of Kindervelt days where they're talking about possibly going to the reunion, and Fran's like, "I'm not going unless I can go on the arm of a gorgeous, a drop dead gorgeous guy, and it wouldn't hurt if he was rich." And that's when Maxwell walks in. I think he's on the phone with like someone asking if he'll like model. He's like, "I know what would I do with a second Lamborghini?"
Yeah.
And you're right. Val puts together like, you should ask him, have him take you.
Yeah. So obviously there are times when she can pick up on that stuff, but then you have at the same point, like in the exact same episode with Lamb Chop. So sorry, different episode, but Lamb Chop, she's worried about waking up Lamb Chop.
Correct.
It's like Val. Lamb Chop's a puppet.
And she's super excited to meet Lamb Chop because she promises she won't say anything stupid. And Fran's like, too late, Val. Too late.
Yeah. Yep. So again, I don't know if she plays more of a role later on. But I feel like again, she just pops in, you know. We haven't seen I don't think a ton of her.
So I feel comfortable at this point saying we do see more of her as the series goes on. But I mean, I feel like most of what we know about her at this point is like most of what we'll learn about her. Like, yeah, sometimes she can be very astute, but more often than not, she isn't. She's yeah, she's special in her own right. But yeah. Are there any other like bigger picture things you feel like we should talk about?
Trying to think.
There's a lot of material in this
There is a
season.
lot. There is a lot. So, no, not at the moment. If we want to get into some more specifics.
Sure. Do we want to talk about some notable fashion, perhaps?
And I'm gonna actually let you take the lead just because for me personally, I'm not really into fashion in general. So like I have a harder time remembering it. So like as I see here right now, there's not really anything that sticks out to me. I'm sure once you start talking, it'll jog my memory.
That's fair. So first, I will say, according to the wardrobe files on YouTube, Fran wore 104 outfits this season.
Oh wow!
Which I looked back at my notes from our season 1 recap. The same person on YouTube, the wardrobe files, noted that she also wore 104 outfits last season.
Oh wow!
In season 2, again, according to the wardrobe files, her 104 outfits included 15 animal print, 34 layered vests, 11 matching sets, and 32 skirt suits. So I kind of went through and looked at, what she wore throughout the season. I kind of broke it up into 3 different categories: iconic, favorite, and things I didn't like. So iconic, to me, one of the things that came to mind while looking through them is like the use of animal print. Obviously, like according to the wardrobe files, again, 15 different times. But like to me, the one that sticks out is from Everybody Needs a Bubby, where she's wearing, what looks like a leopard print jacket over a leopard print dress. And I think like her mother and her grandmother both have on like some form of animal print, and I think also like some gold or yellow. To me, that's iconic. Like she's constantly wearing an animal print. The red dress she wore to go out on that first date with Theo with those really big fake earrings that Niles jokes about, that he was changing the bulb. because they look like chandeliers. That's also the red dress that Cece makes a comment, I wouldn't be caught dead in that dress. And Niall says, you'd have to be dead 6 months to fit into it, because it was very tight, shall we say. Mm-hmm. Let's see, iconic. So the dress she wore to the Nanny retirement party, I know we talked about a lot a couple weeks ago, but it's that floor length yellow shiny dress that has like the, you know, almost like a racer back, you know, to it. To me, that's very iconic. I have a note, multicolored striped jacket.
I feel like she wears a bunch of those.
Exactly. That's why I'm like
just like a staple in her wardrobe.
Correct. I wish I knew which one I was thinking of. Or perhaps I put it under the wrong file, because the one I can think of is the one with like the strips of different color fabric, which she wears before she's supposed to go out to the Hamptons to have her lobster dinner with Glenn the stockbroker. And that's one we've seen before, and I really don't care for it. Mm-hmm. As for things I really liked that she wore, my favorite episode fashion wise is Canasta Masta, because there are multiple outfits she wears that I love. One of them is the pink, yellow, and black outfit. It's like a plaid jacket with a plaid matching skirt, and then she has a pink button down long sleeve shirt with a black tie and a yellow jacket over that. There's also the outfit she's wearing where she has like the yellow skirt with a black vest, and then this floral long sleeved shirt with like a rounded tufted collar. I really like that as well. I also did like a lot of, some, I should say, not everything, but some things that she wore in the episode of Star is Unborn, where she was clearly trying to channel Juliet, you know, with the bell sleeves and the things off her shoulders. And yeah, those are things I particularly liked. In iconic, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the numerous times she wore a bathrobe to breakfast or elsewhere. And then as for other thing I didn't like, in the episode of Star is Unborn, she has this like color block jacket dress, which has like one red sleeve, one pink sleeve, and then the front is like half blue and half green, like divided vertically. Mm-hmm. I didn't care for that. Yeah. So those are the things that stuck out to me. I guess I'll also mention what she wore in the last scene of the episode Fran Gets Mugged, because it's also sort of top of mind since we just talked about it. It's that, you know, scoop neck black dress, or it's kind of unclear if it's a dress or a skirt and a blouse, but anyway, and then the top has like frillier sleeves or bell sleeves. I'm not quite sure how to describe it. But yeah, it's like she looked very nice in that. When she and Maxwell had that moment right before, you know, Niles alerted them to the fact that they had been robbed. So yeah, I think
you did a great job, Debbie.
Thank you. That's the fashion that sticks with me.
Yeah. So. Again, I mean, bathrobes we always talk about. We can recognize, again, in general, I'll just say this: I appreciate it when they reuse outfits, because I feel like that's more realistic than constantly buying stuff to your wardrobe.
Fair.
So that's what I'll kind of say about the fashion, is I did notice in the season the times when they reused outfits from previous episodes. Mm-hmm. So going into, we've had a lot of different guest stars and references and that kind of stuff this season. Is there anything that kind of sticks out to you? Do you have a favorite? In general, do you like it when there's guest stars or not?
I guess I don't dislike it or like it. I think it's fine. I like that we have new characters coming and I guess, going when their arc is over. I will say that in the episode The Playwright, Jeffrey Needleman was played by Richard Kind. And I have this recollection that we forgot to mention him by name in our notable New Yorkers on that episode. He has been on Law and Order SVU, Kim Possible, Reba, Scrubs, and he's also more recently, so long after The Nanny, he also guest starred on Indebted, which was Fran Drescher's latest show back in like 2020 or 2019. So that's all according to IMDb, our friends there. As for the guests I particularly like, Christopher Rich. He's the one who played Kurt. I know him best, I guess, from Reba. He played Brock. So I enjoy seeing him. And then most, I guess, unusual would be Lamb Chop.
Unexpected.
Yeah, as a guest star, you don't necessarily think of Lamb Chop, but she did. She was there with Sherry Lewis. Did you have a favorite, or do you like it when we have these guest stars? Do you know who they are, like, affirmatively?
Yeah. So like I can recognize them, right? So for instance, Wallace Shawn, recognized him right off the bat. He played Charles Haste, the rich garbage man investor. Corbin Burnson, I know him more from like Psych, the TV show. And like you said, I recognize Richard Kind, but also Christopher Rich, recognized him from Reba, and obviously recognized Billy Ray Cyrus. So like I didn't know everybody who guest starred, right? But for some of them, I definitely recognize them from other things. It's just interesting to me because I've kind of noticed I'm not typically as much of a fan of the episodes that actually have like special guest stars.
Oh, interesting.
I I don't know why. We'll see if that changes like next season. But yeah,
do you find the like guest stars to be like a distraction from like the main crew, and like subconsciously you just want them to go away so we can focus on the Sheffield family?
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, like, because definitely, and this might even be more of a season 1 thing, because in season 1 specifically, they had some iconic actresses guest star, but I didn't find their characters to be likable. And so it kind of detracted from that enjoyment of seeing like those iconic, I'm thinking of Rita Moreno, who was like the gym teacher, like, not a likable character. Similarly, when they had, what's her name? She played the former nanny who had Niles.
I know the character's name, Clara.
Yes,
Clara.
The actress's name escapes me right now. I apologize for that. But again, great actress. Wasn't a fan of like her character in the show. Now, like you said, I think A Fine Friendship is the one that has
Christopher
Rich, and I rank that as a 5. So that obviously didn't detract as much from that. It's just that I don't know. I'll have to kind of see as the series progresses whether this is a consistent thing or not. But like I find, again, maybe it's just that oftentimes the characters are not very likable, because like Jeffrey Needleman did not like that episode,
right.
Christopher, Charles Haste, not a great character. So that may affect it somehow, like in terms of how they're using the characters. I don't know.
So, like, for example, in Strange Bedfellows, Tyne Daly played Mona. That one you seem to like, because we both gave that a 5.
And I will say, yeah, so that was fine. Yeah. But also I feel like she was used as kind of a reflection of Fran, right?
Yes.
Versus a lot of times maybe these characters are used to create conflict,
Hmm.
to drive this particular plot of the episode. So yeah, you're right. It's not all the time, but it's sometimes when they're using them specifically to kind of cause the drama, or they're very unlikable characters,
No, that's fair. And also because uh, you couldn't remember her name. Clara Mueller was played by Cloris Leachman.
Yes, thank you.
So
I knew it started with the C.
just so you won't have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning
I
realizing.
appreciate that.
You're very welcome. One other guest star I guess I want to mention is Roger Clinton.
That was so
Um,
random.
he'll be back. So as I think I mentioned. Um, so yeah, no, it's interesting because you're right. Sometimes the guest star is such an unlikable character, or they drive so much of the plot that it sort of takes away from, like, I'm thinking of the episode when you pish upon a star. Like, neither of us liked that episode particularly because Jack Walker was such a little jerk.
Yep.
And he drove almost the entire episode, and he was just so irritating and annoying.
And he got away with it.
He did. And he also was like not just irritating for the audience, but he was irritating towards like every member of the Sheffield home except Niles.
Niles got some money.
Niles got a lot of money just for being him. But yeah, so interesting.
Yeah.
Should we talk about some 90s nostalgia?
Sure. Did you want to mention anything with Yiddish Cop though before we got there?
Oh,
or no?
Sure. I'll again mention the constant violations of kashrut, particularly Fran. And this is, I think, what I mentioned at the end of season 1. But here I'll give specific examples of Fran wanting to eat lobster on the plane in Material Fran, and planning to go eat a 7-pound lobster in the Hamptons in the episode Stock Tip. Lobsters aren't kosher. They're basically sea bugs. As a friend of mine phrased it, like, you don't eat land bugs because they're not kosher. You don't eat anything that creeps or crawls or anything like that. So it makes sense that you wouldn't eat sea bugs. Again, for seafood, it's fish that have fins and scales. Those are the only things that are kosher. So that's all I'll mention.
Okay.
Yeah. So 90s nostalgia. Does the series feel dated? Were there episodes that I think we've talked about it, like, when we talked about each episode, but, like, are there episodes that stick out to you as either being dated or unrealistic now or anything like that?
Yeah, there's like several from the season. Again, from recent episodes, we talked about this at length, like the whole kissing contest. Just seems like incredibly dated. So there's definitely, I would say, certain episodes that, or how they approach certain topics. I'm thinking when Fran had the cousin who impersonated Cher.
Yep.
That whole thing. Like, there's obviously, you can tell it was not made in 2022, as a whole though, like, there's the general kind of like the will they won't they slow burn kind of thing, I think is like a classic kind of TV show, right? That is not necessarily dated in that respect. Does that make sense?
No, I agree. It's a trope that I think we continue to see on other TV shows, even those that are produced now or more recently.
And again, kind of now I'm thinking too that, The Longest Laugh, we both mentioned it reminded us of I Love Lucy. Like, just kind of that kind of comedy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like that again, people still watch I Love Lucy to this day. So there's certain elements that's a little bit timeless, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there are specific plot points that I definitely think are dated. And obviously, like from a technological like and fashion and all that kind of stuff, you can tell it was not made in 2022, but can still be enjoyable. What do you think?
I agree on every point. Um, just as I was like thinking about which episodes were in this season and like things I guess that would be, would have to be different, or like the plot points feel less realistic. A lot of it came down to like the existence of the internet. Um, so like, for the Kinderwelt Days episode, you know, she gets this movie star to accompany her. Um, the fact that he was going to the reunion would have been very well publicized on his social media channels,
Mm-hmm.
if that had happened today. Um, and like it would likewise, Judy Silverman, you know, passing her friend who's in a relationship with someone else off as her fiance wouldn't be as believable.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing for Fran using Maxwell as the man she lives with, like, because her relationship status probably would not say that she was in a relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, likewise, for a fine friendship, I feel like the confusion surrounding Kurt's sexuality probably wouldn't have happened because, again, social media. Um, and then likewise for, the episode Stock Tip, like Fran probably would have Googled Glenn to like
Mm-hmm.
find out what his background is. Like meeting a guy at a grocery store and going out on a date with him immediately, like having him come to your home to pick you up for your date seems like a dangerous proposition in this
Mm-hmm.
day and age. Um, particularly if you haven't gone and like Googled him.
Yeah.
Um, just a thought.
Yeah.
Um, so that there are things like that that seem a little out of touch at this point, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Um,
so
future
future,
gone?
yeah. So we got 4 more seasons to go, guys. I want to say that we have a lot of ground to cover in that time. Just from our conversation, a few things that I wanted to mention. I've kind of said that Yetta is the closest thing to a grandma these kids have, or I guess a great grandma that these kids have. But we do meet Maxwell's parents. We meet his mother and his father separately because they're no longer together. We also meet his stepmother. And we will see how different they are compared to Fran's family. There's an episode, I think it's towards the end of season 3, or maybe it's in season 4, where it's not just Yetta who's kind of like hinting at the fact that, or I should say Niles hinting at the fact that there's something going on with Fran and Maxwell. Sylvia even says to Sylvia and Fran have this exchange where um Fran says, well, we're not married, and Sylvia's like, are you living with him? Yes. Are you taking care of his kids? Yes. Are you having sex? No. Then you're married. And then also, there's an episode, I want to say it's in season 5, it's titled Who's Got the Pearls, where Fran hits her head, ends up with amnesia, and she doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know who anyone else is. And so she's talking to Yetta, who clues her in to her life. And she notes, she indicates that. So actually, I think Fran says to Yetta, well, I guess my life really turned out the way I expected it to. I'm married to this gorgeous guy. I've got 3 great kids. And Yetta's like, oh, honey, you're confused. The first 2 are from his previous marriage. The little one is yours. Or something like that. And then there's also another episode where uh Maxwell, there there are two different episodes, one where Maxwell, has had too much to drink, and he's clearly hungover, and he makes a comment to Fran about Gracie, when did we have her? And Fran's like, never mind when we had her. When can we start making another one?
Oh my goodness.
So like there are these constant things that show that their relationship is not purely professional. There's actually, just on that note, I was not planning to talk about this, but I'm gonna go down the rabbit hole because they're fun. There's actually an episode where Fran is thinking of using artificial insemination, a sperm donor and artificial insemination, to have a baby. And she takes home the book of, sperm donors, and she picks out one that she thinks is perfect. And so she wants to talk to Maxwell about it. And she describes him as number 4, as 42. He's, smart, handsome, creative, with a big head of hair. And Maxwell, of course, thinks she's talking about him. And she tells him how much she values his contribution and blah, blah, blah. And he totally freaks out. She was not thinking of using him. But like, they sort of entertained this discussion of like, well, what would that have even looked like? You're going to pay me to take care of our kid? Wait a minute, this might work. They don't go down that road. So I mean, there's a lot about their relationship and how it's more than just a professional like relationship. They are clearly friends. There's more there, as we've seen. And we have a lot of good stuff ahead of us, and I frankly cannot wait to jump into season 3 with you. So I think, like, without having the cold hard numbers in front of me, I would say season 3 is my favorite. So I'm very much looking forward
to.
Exactly. It's going to be delightful. I can just keep on ranting about things we're going to see in the future, so I will stop here. Okay. I guess it's time to look at look at the cold hard numbers.
Yes, let's look at the cold hard numbers.
So as of right now, our average scores are not that far off. Mm-hmm. So your average score for an episode is 4.03. I'm rounding at the second decimal place.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm at 4.12. Mm-hmm. So we're not that far off. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so are there any episodes you want to re-rate or change?
Yes.
Or
yes, all right. Is. So the one that came to mind, especially now looking at how others were rated, because again, when it comes to rating episodes, it's kind of different for me than you, because I really am just basing it on what I've seen thus far, versus like you have a sense overall, right?
Yeah.
What's your favorite? No. I want to talk to play because right now, when you push upon a star and Chatterbox are lower than that, and I feel like I did not enjoy the playwright more than them. Does that make sense? So,
okay,
I am done at 201.
Wow.
From a 2.5. From a 2.5 to a 1.
Okay. That's quite a downgrade.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here's my problem, Debbie. In general. Oh, are you going to change it on the second?
I just wanted to see what the math did.
Ah, gotcha.
So by doing that, your average rating drops down to a 3.97.
Yes.
Okay.
But still, again, we're both around a 4.
Yeah.
So, no, the reason, yeah, I, in general, have a hard time. I don't know how other people do their ratings. or anytime you have like an evaluation you have to do. Let's say like you in school you have to do like the teacher evaluations.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the type of person who like starts at a 5 and then deducts
Oh,
versus
interesting.
like versus people who like maybe start at a 3 and either go up or down, or
Mm-hmm.
like like generally I tend to rate things higher um because I feel bad otherwise. But now just in retrospect I feel comfortable giving a 1.
Okay, no, that's totally your prerogative. As you've said, we make the rules. Um, that's fine. But I'm mathematically, it takes your average rating.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
No, I mean,
Well,
fine.
now I'm curious what my average was for season 1. Let me look at that quickly.
So for season 1, you started at 3.81.
Okay, so still this is higher than season 1, and I think that tracks. I think generally speaking I liked season 2 more.
Yeah, no, I mean the numbers don't lie. Um, my
Except
average,
when, they
except when they do.
fluctuate, but whatever.
So the 3.8 81 does not take into account the revisions you did.
Gotcha.
I haven't figured out how best to do the numbers so it tracks, but
Well, so partly I went again going to from season 1, I went from a 4 to a 4.5 on one and 5 to 4 on the other. So that actually kind of,
and from 2.5 to 2 on a third
yeah.
one.
So not big leaps. I think this is
Correct.
the biggest leap I've done.
Yes. Yes, this is. I feel confident without
Shocking.
looking at the numbers that yes, this is. Um, I mean that's fair. I get that. You're right. You had a lot of issues with that episode. So
I did. So not one I would watch again, go out of my way to watch again. So other than that, that was like the only episode I had a really strong feeling about changing the numbers. There's probably other instances where I could go up or down a little bit, but nothing that really like sticks out to me. What
mm-hmm.
about you?
So I I don't have any that I like really need to adjust.
Mm-hmm.
The only one that like I struggle with is the episode Take Back Your Mink, because I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely love the episode, but I hate the comment about minks not being animals so much that I deducted a full point. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I don't really want to go back on that, but I feel like that's an episode that I do watch over and over and over again because I just find it so delightful, like the plot around it and how it resolves and um things like that I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I'm artificially keeping my score down. Like if I were to change it to a 5,
Mm-hmm.
then my average rating would be 4.15
Mm-hmm.
instead of 4.12.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna stick to my guns.
Okay. That's
Um,
fair.
I'm also tempted to give the Chatterbox a 0.
Do
Um,
it. We
but
make the rules.
we do make the rules, but like in rewatching it to talk about it with you, it was better than I remembered. So
Mm-hmm.
like I'm gonna leave it at I'm not I basically the bottom line is I'm not changing my rating of any of
Mm-hmm.
the episodes, even though I'm tempted to like increase one and decrease the other, which would even out. So
Mm-hmm.
it's all fine. Um but I will note that, last season, as you mentioned before, you revised 3. This year you've only revised 1, which means you're being more fine-tuned in your initial rating.
Maybe.
We're
Like
getting
I
into a
said,
groove.
I'm just really bad at reading things, but I'm just gonna stick with what I've said. Aside from that one, yeah.
That, that's totally fine. Um,
But yeah, out of curiosity, Debbie,
yeah,
when you rate things, where's your kind of starting point?
I don't. I actually don't know because I don't think about it like that.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had a like system where I was like, okay, well, the average episode is a 3. but I don't. I'm just like, holistically, where does this episode fall? This one,
Mhm.
like looking at the titles, like there's some episodes that to me are so iconic that like I know exactly when I'm gonna rate them. Like I don't need to watch it. Like I could have a conversation with you about the episode without rewatching it or taking any notes. Like I could summarize it for you right now.
Mhm.
Like those I know what they're going to be like ahead of time. And then there are others that I'm like not as fond of. Those are the ones that I struggle with. So like
Mhm.
for example, I won't say which episode, but there is an episode early in season 3 which I would give more than a 5 if I could,
Mhm.
because I love it so much.
Yeah, so it's
There's
kind of like a 5 star.
yeah, um, exactly.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's fair. I just like I said, I want to also just give the caveat that sometimes how I rate an episode might depend on what my mood was when I watched the episode.
Fair.
Just I'm human. So those outside factors can also like affect how I receive something that particular day. Like if something's funny or not. So I will just caveat that by no means are mine set in stone necessarily, but generally speaking, they're probably pretty accurate. So
No, I mean that's
yep.
fair. I will say watching the nanny usually improves my mood greatly. So
Hmm.
I'm more positive after I've watched an episode. Um, it's my warm and fuzzy spot. Like watching the nanny, it just makes me happy.
Hmm.
Um,
Is there anything else you want to kind of talk about regarding season 2?
I'll just reiterate. I think that with the season as a whole, I think we're on the same page that season 2 is better than season 1, and like, we're both looking forward to season 3 next week.
Especially since you've hyped it. Like I'm excited.
There, I'm not going to give. I don't want to spoil anything, but just like looking at the you know titles of the episodes in season 3, like there are a bunch that are just fantastic that are going to be great to talk about. Um, that I think we're really going to enjoy. Um, I think season 3 is going to have an even higher rating than season 2 for me and for you
Mhm.
also. I mean, I think you're going to find some things a little bit problematic, but I think there are other things that will outweigh
Mhm.
outweigh that significantly. Um, for yeah, so I think that's it.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 49, Pen Pal.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at findtimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.